Welcome back, everyone, to the Lior Super Fun Learning Hour.
Great to be back.
If you've been following along, you know we're well into our seminar series, really digging into the Oedipal triangle. This is actually our 9th episode on it, and today, well, we're turning our focus to a really insightful paper. It's Thomas Ogden's Transitional Oedipal Relationships in Female Development.
Yeah, it's a fantastic paper. It really offers a different lens.
Absolutely. So our mission today, really, is to take a deep dive into Ogden's main points. We want to kind of unpack how he gently challenges, maybe reframes some of Freud's classic ideas.
Right?
And hopefully give you a more nuanced and maybe more accessible view of what's a pretty crucial stage in female psychological development.
You might have some real aha moments listening to this one.
I think so. It helps illuminate those sometimes paradoxical ways a young girl navigates her way into the whole Oedipus complex thing. It's really about how these early relationships lay the groundwork.
It is a bit of a game changer, I think. Ogden doesn't just tweak Freud. He offers this much richer, more relational way of looking at female development. It helps make sense of experiences that maybe Freud's initial ideas didn't fully capture.
Okay, so let's set the stage a bit. To really get what Ogden's bringing to the table, we probably need to quickly touch on Freud's traditional take first. How did Freud originally describe this big shift for girls? What did he think was driving it?
Well, the classic Freudian view suggested that the little girl turns away from her mother and towards her father, mainly because she discovers she doesn't have a penis.
Right, the famous penis envy concept.
Exactly. And in Freud's view, this led to these really intense feelings: shame, disappointment, and crucially, anger at her mother. Anger for bringing her into the world, castrated, as he put it.
Wow, yeah. So that sense of lack and the anger that came with it that was seen as the engine for the whole shift, it does sound pretty abrupt when you put it like that.
It is quite stark. So according to Freud, this feeling of deficiency and the resulting anger would push her to essentially abandon the mother as the primary love object and turn to the father. The hope was that his love, and maybe eventually having a baby with him, would kind of make up for what she felt she was missing.
It's a very shock-based theory almost.
Yeah, you could say that.
So Ogden comes along, and while he definitely acknowledges the clinical importance of Freud's ideas, you see these themes in patients, he felt there were some, let's say, theoretical problems.
Right. He offers this gentle but pretty powerful critique. He suggests Freud's story might be missing some really key distinctions about how these relationships actually work, the type of object relationship involved.
Okay, what kind of distinctions?
Well, one of Ogden's really brilliant points is that this transition isn't just, swapping mom for dad. It's a much deeper shift. It's about moving from relating to an internal object.
Okay, what's an internal object in this sense?
Think of it like an aspect of oneself still partly under the child's feeling of omnipotent control, almost like an imaginary friend, but deeply felt. It's influenced by the child's inner world.
Got it. So from that
to relating to an external object,
right,
a person who is truly separate outside your control with their own reality.
Okay.
And Ogden argues that Freud's shock theory, the sudden disillusionment, if it really happened like that, would probably lead to things like intense narcissistic defenses, becoming overly self-focused, detached, or maybe even schizoid withdrawal, pulling back into oneself.
Not really the foundation for a healthy love for another person.
Exactly. It doesn't seem like the recipe for genuinely connecting with and loving someone external.
So he asks this really fundamental question. Can true love actually grow from feeling ashamed and defective?
Right.
Ogden thinks, no, real Oedipal love, healthy love, should probably come from a place of, healthy self-worth, hope, being open to the unknown. That's what allows a girl to take the risk, the emotional risk, of loving an external father. It's a totally different starting point, emotionally.
Completely different. And Ogden, he looks at observational studies, too, and he kind of questions whether penis envy and those castration fantasies, while they definitely exist and are important clinically, are they really the main reason a girl turns to her father? He challenges that assumption that a girl's experience of her own body is just defined by absence, by what she lacks, instead of, what she has.
That feels like a really important shift, moving away from a deficit model.
It is. It recenters her own experience.
Okay, but to really get Ogden's, the core of his contribution, we need to understand the bigger developmental picture he's drawing on. Specifically, this idea of how kids first recognize otherness.
You're absolutely right. At the heart of it, psychological development is about this growing ability to be aware of otherness, that there are people, things, realities separate from you.
And early on, that's not really the case, is it, with the mother?
Not so much. Early on, the mother often acts more like a holding environment. She provides this illusion of what Winnicott called the subjective object.
Subjective object.
Yeah, where the infant feels like they create their world, like the breast appears just when they feel hunger. There's not much sense of difference between me and not me. The mother feels like an extension of the baby's will.
Okay, and Winnicott's famous idea of the transitional object, the teddy bear,
Yeah.
the blanket that helps bridge this gap, right? From feeling all-powerful to realizing things are separate.
Exactly. Transitional object is just this beautiful paradox. For the child, it's somehow both found and created. It's both real and fantasy, both me and not me.
And the magic is the child doesn't have to decide which it is.
Precisely. It just exists in that amazing space between the inner world and outer reality. It's not a question that needs answering for the child.
So Ogden takes this idea and runs with it. He talks about transitional phenomena having a dialectical structure. What does he mean by that?
He means that these seeming opposites, like oneness and separateness, or reality and fantasy, they don't just oppose each other. They actually coexist. They blend. They enrich each other.
Okay.
This creates this essential space between, which is where subjectivity, imagination, creativity, where all that good stuff happens. It's not just a phase you pass through. It's an ongoing way of experiencing the world.
And this connects to the Oedipus complex how?
Well, for Ogden, entering the Oedipus complex is one of these really big, critical periods of psychological reorganization. It throws a totally new kind of otherness into the mix, into that previously simpler mother-infant world. It demands a big psychological shift.
Okay, and this is where Ogden introduces his central concept, the thing that really sets his paper apart, the transitional Oedipal relationship.
Yes, this is the heart of it. He argues that a little girl's entry into the Oedipus complex isn't usually this abrupt, traumatic thing Freud described. Instead, it's often mediated by a specific kind of transitional relationship with her mother.
With the mother. Okay, how does that work?
The genius of it is how it introduces this new otherness, the father, the third point in the triangle, but in a way that's safe, that's manageable. It's a form of otherness that feels both other and not other simultaneously.
Both other and not other.
Yeah, it's a paradox, just like the transitional object. So in simple terms, the little girl kind of falls in love with the mother as father and the father as mother.
Okay, unpack that a little. Mother as father.
It means she's loving her mother, but her mother, often unconsciously, is identifying with or embodying aspects of her own father, or perhaps the symbolic father principle, separateness structure, maybe.
I see. And for the little girl, she doesn't have to sort out, am I loving mom or dad? Or is this internal or external?
Exactly. For her, in that moment, it's just both. It doesn't require that kind of splitting. And this, Ogden says, is how the first truly triangulated relationship involving three elements can actually start within the two-person mother-daughter dynamic.
Wow.
And maybe even how the first heterosexual relationship, in a symbolic sense, develops between two females. The father, as a desired figure, is sort of discovered in the mother. It makes the whole transition much less potentially shocking.
So the mother in this role is kind of unconsciously giving her daughter permission, a blessing even, to become interested in the father.
Yes, that's a great way to put it. It's almost like the mother's unconscious is saying, you know, if I were a man, I'd be in love with you too. Or perhaps conveying her own positive feelings about the father.
That provides a kind of safe DARF, like a dress reversal.
That's a perfect metaphor. A dress rehearsal for the later, more fully external Oedipal drama. It allows the girl to start loving the father figure without feeling she has to totally reject or betray her mother to do it.
That makes so much sense. It preserves the connection while allowing for expansion.
Right. It's play, but it's deeply serious psychological play. It happens in the safety of the dyad, but the father's presence is felt, imagined, desired within that space.
But even with this gentler transition, Ogden mentions that discovering the mother is actually separate, that she has her own life. That can still feel like a bit of a betrayal.
Oh, absolutely. Even in the best circumstances, that growing awareness of the mother's externality, you know, she has her own thoughts, her own desires, her own relationship with the father that excludes the child that can still sting. It's that classic childhood moment of, hey, wait, we had a deal. Why is your bedroom door closed now?
Yeah, I recognize that feeling.
Yeah.
So, okay, what happens if this crucial transitional relationship doesn't quite work? If it's inadequate or somehow fails?
Well, Ogden suggests that if this foundational relationship isn't there or isn't working well, it can really stifle the girl's natural interest in the father. It can create this powerful, often unconscious feeling that her Oedipal wishes, her desires towards the father, are somehow forbidden.
Right, forbidden, or maybe just pointless, like he has nothing to offer her.
Exactly, or that any interest in him would be a terrible betrayal of the mother.
And this can then lead to specific patterns, defenses later in life.
Yes, he links it to some very distinct character defenses in adulthood. For instance, a woman might develop what he calls a hyperfeminine stance.
Hyperfeminine.
Meaning, she might unconsciously deny or disavow any capacities within herself that feel masculine things, like logical thinking, assertiveness, maybe even practical skills like fixing things. Not because she can't do them, but because identifying with those father-associated qualities feels unconsciously like a forbidden act, a betrayal of her primary bond with her mother.
Interesting. And the flip side?
The flip side could be a woman who develops this pervasive feeling that, there's nothing a man can do that I can't do. Now, on the surface, that sounds like competence, but Ogden suggests it can be a defense.
A defense against what?
Against the unconscious conviction that genuinely needing or loving the father, or any man representing him, would be a devastating betrayal of the mother. This can show up as an inability to accept help, especially for men, maybe a difficulty in forming mutually dependent relationships. And in extreme cases, Ogden suggests it might even contribute to what he terms a pathological form of homosexual object choice, choosing women exclusively as a way to completely avoid the conflict and perceived betrayal associated with loving men.
Wow. So this really gets to the heart of identity, doesn't it? This idea of an impossible choice.
Absolutely. If that transitional play space between mother and daughter collapses, if the girl feels forced into an either situation, you must choose, love me or love your father, embrace your femaleness or your maleness, it can feel internally like a suicidal choice.
Suicidal because?
Because it feels like choosing one means killing off a vital part of herself. If she chooses mother femaleness, the father maleness within her feels like it dies, and vice versa.
That's intense.
It is. And Ogden suggests this can lead to very fragile identities, what he calls pseudo-identities. They lack that rich, dynamic interplay, that dialectic between healthy masculinity and femininity, because the tension couldn't be held, it had to be split.
It sounds like trying to live on only half your resources.
That's a good way to think about it.
Ogden provides a clinical example, right, to make this more concrete. The case of Elle.
Yes, it's a really compelling case. Elle was a 27-year-old graduate student, and she came to therapy suffering from pretty extreme loneliness, feeling like life was pointless. She also presented in a way that seemed quite masculine, and she actively rejected sex.
And her background fit this picture.
It really did. Her father had been absent, and her mother had actually kept his existence a secret from her for a long time. Her internal world, as it emerged in therapy, reflected that men were seen as ruthless, women as completely weak and victimized.
So a lot of splitting there. All good or all bad.
Exactly. Initially, the therapy had to focus on her schizoid withdrawal, her pulling away from reality, and these splitting defenses.
So how did the idea of the transitional Oedipal relationship come into play with Elle? How did it help?
Well, there was this really pivotal moment in therapy. Elle started to perceive something new in her female therapist. She described it as a kind of hardness, but clarified it wasn't harsh or cold.
Yeah.
She even called it sexy, but then immediately said it was different from the homosexual feelings she had before.
So this was something new.
It was a potential breakthrough. Ogden saw this as the father and mother, the maleness and femaleness, starting to emerge in the transference in the relationship with the therapist. It was unfamiliar but captivating for Elle.
But she wasn't in love with the therapist?
No, she was clear about that. And her reason was fascinating. She said, being in love with the therapist would be like being trapped in a dark, musty cave.
Wow, what a powerful image.
Isn't it? It clearly spoke to her unconscious fear of being pulled back into that primitive, overwhelming, undifferentiated state with the mother figure, the pre-Oedipal dyad.
So this new perception, this hardness and softness, it wasn't a threat of regression, but an opening.
Exactly. It allowed her, really for the first time since she was a small child, to feel genuinely curious about her own father. It was a step forward.
That's huge. What did that curiosity lead to?
It spurred her to actually look for old family photos, to try and imagine what her father looked like by, as she put it, subtracting her mother's features, something she'd avoided her whole life. This act started opening the door to trying on new ways of identifying.
And then there was the skirt and blouse.
Yes. Later on, she came to a session wearing a skirt and blouse. For her, this was a massive deal, filled with anxiety but also courage.
How did the therapist respond?
With a warm, accepting smile. And Ogden interprets this moment as Elle tentatively stepping into the Oedipus complex proper. She was trying on an identification with the therapist as the accepting Oedipal mother.
Allowing herself to be seen in a different way.
Precisely. And then, significantly after this, Elle started having conscious sexual fantasies, specifically about having a torrid affair with Humphrey Bogart.
The Bogart, okay.
And crucially, in the fantasy, she identified herself with Lauren Bacall, whom she saw as a gutsy woman.
Bacall. Gutsy, so not weak.
Not weak at all. Ogden explains this fantasy as representing a more fully developed, triangulated object relationship. Bacall, as this gutsy woman, carried elements of the man and woman that father and mother quality Elle had first sensed in the therapist.
Ah, I see. So Bacall bridged the gap.
Exactly. It allowed Elle to safely engage with the Oedipal father figure Bogart as an external, separate object, mediated through this identification with Bacall, who embodied both strength and femininity.
It's such a clear illustration of the theory. How that transitional process allows for discovering otherness within the familiar, leading to a healthier, more integrated sense of self and gender.
It really brings the concept to life, doesn't it? And it forces us to kind of reevaluate Freud's original ideas.
How so?
Well, Ogden basically suggests that what Freud described the centrality of penis envy, the anger, the turning away driven by lack, might often be describing a common pathological outcome or maybe just one sub-theme within female development rather than the single universal path for all girls.
So it happens, but it's not the only way, and maybe not the healthiest way.
Right. For example, if a mother does unconsciously believe being female is flawed or second best, then her daughter is very likely to internalize that shame. That creates a narcissistic wound, a feeling of defectiveness, which then might propel her towards the father to feel complete.
Which would look exactly like Freud described.
It would. And that, Ogden says, could explain Freud's observation about excessive narcissism, sometimes seen in women. But he reframes it as a consequence of this specific pathological dynamic, not an inevitable outcome of being female.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And the anger at the mother.
Ogden suggests it's not just about not having a penis, it's also, maybe more importantly, about the mother becoming more external, having her own separate life, her own private romantic relationship with the father. That's the perceived betrayal we talked about earlier. It shifts the focus from anatomy to the relationship dynamic itself.
It's much more relational. Ogden also touches on how this plays out for therapists, right? Particularly female therapists.
Yeah.
The countertransference issues.
Yes, he does. It's a really honest look at the challenges. For example, a female therapist who hasn't fully worked through her own unconscious identification with her father
Okay.
might find herself experiencing the patient's budding interest in the father figure, even just symbolically, in the transference as a kind of personal betrayal.
How might that show up in the therapy?
It could lead to subtle difficulties, maybe unconsciously fostering an alliance of two women against the male world, siding with the patient against men in a way that hinders integration.
Oh, wow. That could really stall things.
Definitely. It can make the patient feel trapped in that impossible choice again. Do I stay loyal to my therapist as the possessive mother figure, or do I explore this connection to the father figure and risk losing her? This can lead to patients dropping out of therapy or regressing developmentally.
So the therapist's work is to hold that tension, allow the patient to experience both mother and father qualities, both within themselves and in the transference.
Exactly. To foster that dialectical experience, that integration, rather than forcing another painful split. Ogden uses this incredibly powerful dream image from a patient, being on a crashing airplane and having to choose which parent to sit next to, knowing the other one would die. That captures the feeling of the suicidal choice involved when that essential transitional space collapses.
That's a chilling image. It really drives home the stakes. Okay, so we've really covered a lot of ground here with Ogden's transitional Oedipal relationship in female development. We've seen how he reframes that whole female Oedipal story.
Highlighting that crucial role of the mother, mediating the girl's entry into loving an external father in a way that isn't necessarily traumatic.
Yeah, it's all about creating that safe, paradoxical space between, where the father is somehow discovered in the mother.
It really paints psychological growth as, not a straight line at all. It's much more like a dance full of these paradoxes, transitions, and this constant discovery of otherness, but within the familiar.
And it speaks volumes about not having to choose between vital parts of yourself, right?
Yeah.
Allowing for that mix, that interplay of masculinity and femininity for a healthier, more flexible gender identity.
Absolutely. Integration, not splitting.
So the thought maybe to leave you with is, what does this incredibly nuanced understanding mean for how we think about our own earliest relationships and how they shaped our identities? It's a potent reminder that sometimes the strongest connections and maybe the most solid sense of self are built in those subtle, integrated spaces between things that seem separate.
How do these deep, often unconscious patterns continue to play out in our adult lives, in our relationships, our sense of self, even when we're not aware of them?
Definitely something to mull over. We really hope this deep dive gave you some fresh perspectives, maybe sparked some new questions for you.
There's always more to explore.
Absolutely. So please join us next time on The Deep Dive, part of the Leo 4 Super Fun Learning Hour, as we continue hunting for those important nuggets of knowledge.